Good evening, this is Harvey Ambrose. I am a guest minister on the Wells of Salvation Radio Ministry, preaching tonight to Grace Baptist Mission in Soldotna, Alaska. Continuing our study of the book of Daniel, we come to chapter 11. Correction, chapter 10. And I'll probably just start by reading the first 9 verses and then we just go from there. Daniel chapter 10. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a thing was revealed unto Daniel, whose name was called Belteshazzar, and the thing was true, but the time appointed long. And he understood the thing, and had understanding of the vision. In those days, I, Daniel, was mourning 3 full weeks. I ate no pleasant bread, neither came flesh nor wine in my mouth, neither did I anoint myself at all, till 3 whole weeks were fulfilled. And in the 24th day of the month, as I was by the side of the great river, which is Hiddekel, then I lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man, clothed in linen, whose loins were girded with fine gold of Uphaz. His body also was like the beryl, and his face as the appearance of lightning, and his eyes as lamps of fire, and his arms and his feet like in colored to polished brass, and the voice of his words like the voice of a multitude. And I, Daniel, alone saw the vision, for the men that were with me saw not the vision, but a great quaking fell upon them, so that they fled to hide themselves. Therefore I was left alone, and saw this great vision, and there remained no strength in me, for my comeliness was turned in me into corruption, and I retained no strength. Yet heard I the voice of his words, and when I heard the voice of his words, then was I in a deep sleep on my face, and my face toward the ground. And I'll stop the reading there. Now in chapter 10, we need to understand that it serves as a preamble or perhaps an introduction to chapters 11 and 12. Because the whole thing, all 3 chapters are about an event. The event is the Lord Jesus appearing to Daniel and what he discloses to Daniel concerning the future. That's what it's about. We know what the book of Daniel has thus far revealed to Daniel, both by Nebuchadnezzar's dreams and his own dreams and visions, meaning Daniel's, that there were, starting with the kingdom of Babylon in which Daniel lived, there were to be 4 world empires, starting with Babylon and ending with Rome, during which days the God of heaven would start a kingdom here on this earth. And we have been through this, and we see where it's shown in statues, and it's shown in beasts, then it's shown in different kinds of beasts representing the same thing, and how that ties to Revelation. With the beast in Revelation, those activities they all work together to show the same picture. Except in Revelation, I think it goes further in time to a kingdom past that 4th kingdom that we read about, meaning past Rome, that was spoken of by the Apostle John, who wrote the book of Revelation and saw the vision, as being one yet to come, a kingdom yet to come, or an empire yet to come. So anyway, we see that, and we've been focusing in on the kingdoms that surround the land of Israel, where Daniel's people, he was, just like we're interested in our country, Daniel's interested in his country. His country has been enslaved in Egypt and set up as a nation afterward. They sinned, so they were sent into Babylonian captivity. It's time for them to come out of captivity according to the prophecy. He's wanting to know, is that going to happen? When's that going to happen? What's that going to look like? And so he's visited by Gabriel, who tells him a timeline, which is what we did last week. It's exactly how long it's going to be from a particular commandment sent out by one of the kings of Persia. And from that point until Messiah is 483 years. Messiah will do his ministry for 3.5 more years. And then his disciples will continue on in that ministry for another 3.5 years, thus making a total of 490 years, after which God will have judged Israel. He's not punished them yet. That'll be another 40 years later, in 70 AD. But as far as he's concerned, the religious system that he set up for the Jewish nation, which is, sacrificial offerings of bulls and goats and rams and turtle doves and all that kind of stuff, as a substitutionary death for our sins, is completely done away with, because God himself took upon himself the flesh of a man and made the one time, once for all, great sacrifice for the sins of mankind, whereby if you're saved, it's because of what happened then, about 2,000 years ago, and that ended all the typical religion, meaning those things which prefigured in a type or a figure the true sacrifice, which was Christ. So just as we've learned this, Daniel learned this over the years that he was in Babylon, and he wrote it down. But now I think the occasion for chapters 10, 11, and 12, and like I say, 10 just introduces what's going to be a vision of the future in chapter 11, and then its resolution in chapter 12. So chapter 10 shows how it came to Daniel, how Daniel came to have this vision revealed to him. It says that he was fasting for 21 days. It specifically talks about the types of foods he didn't eat, which leaves open that he may have eaten some food. But, the type of food that he liked, he shunned, and he had no wine, presumably water, and maybe just a little bit of bread or something. But he denied himself. And we, as people of God, we are called upon by Jesus himself. He says, deny yourself, take up your cross and follow me. We are to also keep under our physical bodies. If we are to have something like what happened to Daniel happen to us, the Lord himself coming on the scene directly as a result of our prayer, which we're about to see, that's what happened. Daniel prayed through. The Lord heard and came and answered him. So we've seen that before in chapter 9. Even while he was speaking, the answer came from Gabriel, whom God sent. But in chapter 10, it's pretty clear that it's Jesus that came. Now, not in flesh and blood, but in the appearance of a man. And so we read that, the Word, this is Christ, who made the world, was with God and was God, and all things were made by him. Even though he did not count it robbery to be equal with God, because he was equal with God, yet someone's on the phone. I'm going to ask you to make sure you mute your phone. We're getting some feedback. And if you guys would make sure you mute. Who's on the phone?
Harvey, it's Tom.
Hey, Tom.
And I'll get that shut off.
Okay, well, good to have you with us. And if you would mute it, because it's squeaking around kind of. Unfortunately, I'm easily distracted. So, okay, that's great. Well, no, it's not done yet. So let me see. There's got to be a mute button somewhere. Or not a mute, it'd be like a little speaker, like a microphone sign.
Yeah.
Like a radio station. Are you using an iPhone?
Yeah.
Okay, you ought to be able to either slide down from the top or slide up from the bottom, depending upon the age of your iPhone. And there ought to be a way to
usually
view that. Yeah?
Boy, it's just not
Oh,
there.
I know what it is.
Probably have to-
Do you have a word that says hide on your screen? Do you have the keypad showing? What are you looking at? What are you looking at on your phone right now?
Well, usually I have no problem, but for some reason it's not showing any way to mute.
Okay, what does it show on your screen right now?
Just all the numbers
Okay,
and the star.
okay. Well, look to the lower right and see if you see the word hide.
No,
You don't see hide anywhere on that screen.
not sure. Yeah, I'm sorry
Ah.
about that.
Yeah, on mine you just hit hide and then you see where you can mute the microphone. Maybe just touch that screen and see if it goes away.
Yeah.
Online, you can touch
Janet, what'd you say?
online, I think you can touch the power button and it'll show.
Okay, Janet says on hers you can just tap that home button, that power button at the bottom, and it will show it.
I'm not sure how.
Yeah, it's still kind of making the noise.
Yeah, it's not working. Sorry about that.
So,
You might have to shut his phone off and start it again.
yeah, Dick said you might have to shut it off and try again, but there's got to be a way. You ought to be able to slide the screen one way or the other, or touch the home button down at the bottom. But there, like I can do that now, and it goes up to the top. I guess that he just got off. Okay. I'm going to go ahead, guys. I'm going to try to anyway. Hang on. Okay, so we were interrupted some, and I apologize for that. And hopefully Tom will get back on. But so we read that Daniel was fasting, and the question is, why was he fasting? A lot of people have speculated on it, but it's pretty obvious. If we look at the time, it says the 3rd year of Cyrus the king of Persia. Now it gets confusing when you start looking at the 1st year of this king and that king and all that, as though there's a lot of different kings there. There's not. Cyrus was the king of the Persian Empire, of the Medes and the Persians. Okay, Darius was under Cyrus, controlling just the Babylonian province. So he wasn't as great of a king as Cyrus was. Cyrus, when he took Babylon, he ruled for 1 year, and then he turned it over to Darius. So, but he was from the beginning. I think this 3rd year would be the 3rd year after Cyrus took control of Babylon. He was the king of Persia for at least 3 years. As far as Daniel concerned, it was 3 years since he had met Cyrus and he had taken over Babylon. So in the 3rd year of Cyrus the king of Persia, not the king of Babylon, even though Babylon was under his rule as well. So what that means is Daniel had been in captivity for 73 years. That's what that means. So in the 73rd year of his captivity, so if he was 10 when he was taken captive, he's 83. If he was 15, he's 88. So we get an idea of where Daniel is. But also in the 1st year of Cyrus, so he was ruler of Persia and immediately of Babylon for 1 year before he handed it over to Darius, handed Babylon over. Then in that 1st year, we read something that Cyrus wrote. And I think we read about it last year also. Last week. In the book of Ezra, chapter 1, verse 1 says, "Now, in the 1st year of Cyrus, king," so this is 2 years before Daniel saw this, "the word of the Lord by the mouth, so that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah the prophet might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia." I want you to think about that, because that's what this chapter is about, is how the spiritual world intersects with the physical world. The mortal world in which we live is not as isolated as we think it is. If we read the Bible carefully enough, we understand that there is God who is a spirit. He is also a creator of angelic beings who are spoken of as ministering spirits. Some of them warred in heaven and were cast down to the earth, and they do the bidding of the one who has made himself, or God allowed him to be, the head honcho down here of the fallen angels. But there's also good angels, more up there than there are the bad ones down here. And those angels are active in the service of God. And the service of God, ever since the fall of man, has been particularly to save mankind from their sins and reestablish a world in which there's nothing but righteousness, and there will never be anything but it. So the world to come. And in that process, things have to happen. And spirit beings, both that are against the kingdom of heaven being started and realized, and those that are for it, work in this world. But now how do they work? Do they work with flesh and blood? No. In fact, we read the New Testament, it says, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities. And he starts listing these devilish creatures and saying, that's our enemy. We can't see them. We don't understand them. But they work against us. That's who we're fighting against. They work within us. They work in our minds, and they work in our desires. They tempt us with evil. They sometimes put us in a state of depression when we ought not to be. They probably engineer the people around us so that there's strife within a family that there should not be. These things happen all the time. But on the flip side, there's good things, like God stirring up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia. And what it's about is that it says exactly what he was supposed to do. He says that he caused him to make a proclamation and put it in writing. And it says, thus saith Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord God of heaven hath given me all the kingdoms of the earth. He has charged me to build him a house, meaning a temple at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Who is there among you all of his people? His God be with him, and let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and build the house of the Lord his God of Israel, for he is the God which is in Jerusalem. And whoever remaineth in any place where, anyway, it goes on and he says, if you're willing to go, go. And he sent with them all the treasure that had been taken by Nebuchadnezzar that was still left. And they took it with them back to Jerusalem and began to rebuild the temple. Now that's not the decree that starts at 490 years, but it is the decree that was prophesied by Jeremiah that after 70 years of captivity, Cyrus would set them free of Babylonian captivity. That was fulfilled. Now that gets us back to Daniel chapter 10. Why was Daniel fasting? Well, it's been 3 years since he allowed the people to go back. Only 42,000 out of the probably millions that were in Babylonian captivity of Jews, only 42,000 and change went back to Jerusalem. And the ones that did go met with trouble up there. And the work on the rebuilding of the temple and the rebuilding of the nation is going extraordinarily slowly and poorly. They have enemies trying to stop them from doing it. There's been proclamations written to stop it. Daniel is aware of all this, and he wants them to succeed. He's probably heavy-hearted about it, so he spends 3 weeks in prayer. That's what's going on. And fasting. He has humbled himself physically before God, no doubt also in his heart, and dedicated himself to the service of the Jewish people, of whom that's his nation. I mean, that tells us, something about how we need to be if we're really serious about saving this country. It was one man that did that reached out and and got God's attention, whereby we've learned all these things. Just one man. I should be doing it. If I wanted this country to survive, I need to be doing it. Maybe I don't love my country as much as Daniel loved his. Maybe you don't. I don't know. But to save this country is going to take a spirit being, okay? And flesh and blood is not going to do it. We cannot turn around the disaster we're in here. We cannot be patriotic enough to overthrow something that the devil has installed in the United States of America. Because the devil's fingerprint is all over this country, and we can't do a thing, about it truly, effectively, other than to pray. Voting won't cut it anymore. Because both of the parties, and that's all we get, are in this up to their eyeballs as far as this corruption and wickedness. You guys probably heard about the United Methodist Church this week. Voted in conference on the 24th, I think. No, it was in 2024, but it was this week. Yeah, to change their whole articles and everything, and it's fine to have homosexuals, weddings. It's fine to have homosexual pastors and teachers, and yeah, it's just perfectly great. It's wonderful, and that takes a whole denomination by the way of Satan. And you're just at a stroke of a pen. Overwhelmingly voted on by American churches of the Methodist faith. Anyway, I don't mean to get off into that, but Daniel understood that the one that had power is God, and the way to reach God is to humble yourself and pray until you get a response. Now, after 3 weeks of praying, it seems like he stopped. I don't think that was necessarily because he didn't trust God. I think he found that God was going to answer him, and therefore he went about his business, because he removed from Babylon, where he normally was, up towards the Tigris River. Babylon is on the Euphrates. It's about a 30-mile trip, or maybe it's 70. Anyway, to where he was when Christ met him. But he's up on the river Euphrates, and it says that, where does it say what it was? So in the 4th and 20th day of the first month, so that's the month of Abib, when Passover is and everything. So it says, so he prayed through the 21st of that month. 3 days later, he's now up at the side of the great river, which is Hiddekel, which is the river Tigris. Okay, and then in verse 5 it says, and I lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose loins were girded with the fine gold of Uphaz. Yeah, good to have you back, but we're still hearing the noise, but just, I'll try to bear with it. So anyway, he describes this person, and I'm telling you that it's the Lord. And there's a lot of things that show us it's the Lord, but one principal thing is that it perfectly aligns with the book of Revelation, in which John the Apostle on the Isle of Patmos also saw the Lord. Now John knew the Lord. He laid his head on the Lord's breast. He knew exactly who the Lord was. And we will read in John, in the book that John wrote, Revelation chapter 1. And it says, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and I heard behind me a great voice as of a trumpet. So he heard a voice, and the voice was loud. He says, I am Alpha and Omega, the first and the last. We know that's Christ. And what thou seest, write in a book. So he wanted it to be written down. And of course, Daniel must have been told the same thing, because he wrote down chapter 10, right? It doesn't say that he was told that, but he did that, and it's inspired of God. Send it to the 7 churches which are in Asia, and he lists the churches. And then it says, and I turned to see, so John says, I turned to see the voice that spake, and being turned, I saw 7 golden candlesticks, and in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one like unto the Son of Man. Now Jesus always called himself the Son of Man in John's hearing. John knew that, okay? He knew exactly who this was. He says he was clothed in a garment down to the foot, and girt about the paps with a golden girdle. That's exactly what the person who spoke to Daniel was dressed like. He says his head and his hairs were white like wool, white as snow. His eyes were as a flame of fire. That's what Daniel described. It says his feet were like fine brass, and they burned in a furnace, as if they were burned in a furnace. So same thing. If you look at what Daniel describes, he says, a certain man clothed in linen. I'm in Daniel now. His loins were girded with a fine gold of Uphaz, I'm sorry. His body was like beryl, that means blue. It's like the color of the skies. His face as the appearance of lightning. John called it fire. His eyes like lamps of fire. John said essentially the same. All this just corresponds exactly. And it says his feet like the color of polished brass. Exactly what? Burnished, polished, same thing. And the voice, and it says in Daniel, the voice of his words, Christ's words, were like the voice of a multitude. Whereas John said, and his voice as the sound of many waters. You know, we've seen this in movies kind of. When a deity speaks, so-called, it'll have this big sound that's, you know, it's like lots of people talking at once. They got it from the Bible. They had that because it's like many talking at once, but it's just one talking. It's, you know, who knows what that means, but it gets your attention. You see what I'm saying? So I'm going to go back to Daniel, and I want you to understand that for those reasons, as well as what he does with Daniel, what he says to Daniel, we are convinced that this person who came to Daniel 3 days after he had prayed for 21 days fasting, and now he's at the Tigris River, and this person comes. And it's Lord before he was born of the Virgin. It's the pre-incarnate Word of God. And it says, and I, Daniel, alone saw the vision. So there was a vision that's going to be shown. This isn't the vision. This is the Lord coming to him. The vision is in chapter 11 and 12. But Daniel, I'm the only one that saw it, because the men that were with me didn't see the vision, but a great quaking. They started shaking all over, and they fled to hide themselves. Now we can laugh at that, but it's not unique. Remember when Saul on the road to Damascus, the great light that shone above the brightness of the sun, he's off of his horse. He sees the light. He sees the Lord. The other ones, it says they saw the light, but they didn't see an image, nor did they hear the words. And they were terrified. And of course, Saul himself wasn't doing too good. He was down on the ground, and anytime a person gets close to Christ, it is extraordinarily humbling, because it means the Lord is truly there. If he's there with you because you prayed and somehow his Spirit moves in your heart, I don't know if you know, I don't know if you've experienced it. I've experienced it where all I can do is weep. You know, I'm just sitting there weeping with the glory of the fact that I can't, I've lost the control. The Lord's just gotten hold on me. And, you know, it's a glorious thing to be that close to God, but it's, you know, you're not in the driver's seat anymore. You just take what you get. And that's what was going on here. That's a bad way of putting it, but that's all I know they say it. If you've not had it, I can't tell you what it's like. It doesn't happen to me all that much, but it's happened enough that I always like it when it happens to me. I mean, even if it brings up, and it does, when you get that close to the Lord, it brings up your own sinfulness. It's not like he's trying to convince you of it, but just his holiness there. Your spirit sees yourself as in sharp contrast, and you begin to loathe yourself, which makes it hard to be in his presence. But so you weep. This has been replayed over and over and over in the Bible. You know, the book of Job. You know, the Lord appeared in a whirlwind and started putting Job in his place. And finally, Job just breaks down, and he's just down there groveling, and he says, I loathe myself. He's just going on and on about how holy God is and how wicked he is. It happened to Abraham. I believe, when Abraham was saved, was be in Genesis chapter 15, because it says he believed God, and it was counted to him for righteousness. That's how you get righteousness in this world. It's not your own. It's given you. It's imputed to you. Abraham was not saved when he left Ur of the Chaldees. He was saved after having left, and he's up there alone with God, and God appears to him, and the smoking furnace and the lamp that went between the parts of the slain animals, that was the Lord. And Abraham trusted God, and it was counted to him for righteousness. It's over and over in the Old Testament. Anytime someone gets close to God, that they come apart. Isaiah, and I think it's chapter 1, maybe. He says, I'm a man of an unclean mouth that lives in a nation of people of unclean mouths. He couldn't do anything. He was paralyzed by the spirit world interjecting itself into the physical realm in the heart of a physical person. Does that make sense? I don't know how to explain it, but we are not all there is, folks. We are the least of what there is. We're the smallest of this thing. I'm not counting the animals. They're not in the kingdom. We are the one set of flesh and blood persons who are, for better or for worse, depending upon which of these spiritual entities is messing with us. We're the ones that they're the object of this warfare between the heavenlies. It'll come out clear. I don't know how to do it other than just to go on, but Daniel, having seen the Lord, will say, in all of his company, they took off. Remember Jacob, he said, my company has gone before, and a man came and wrestled with him all night long. See, anyway, it's glorious stuff, but I don't have time to preach it all. And I'm not getting the words. But he says, I was left alone. I saw this great vision. Daniel says, there was no strength left in me. My comeliness. In other words, whatever good ideas I had about myself, my comeliness was turned in me into corruption. That's what the Lord, he says, all your righteousness is. The best thing you've got. All of your righteousness is filthy rags. See, he's telling the truth. We just can't hardly come to grips with that. But when you're in his presence, spiritually, he's powerfully there, being in the presence of the Holy One, those things start becoming real to you, as it did Daniel. My comeliness was turned into corruption, and I retained no strength. He was powerless. Yet heard I the voice of his words. I think about that glorious song. I heard the voice of Jesus say, come unto me and rest. Lay down, thou weary one, lay down thy head upon my breast. I came to Jesus as I was, weary and worn and sad. I found in him a resting place, and he hath made me glad. It goes on and on through the callings that Jesus makes to come to him, to drink of him, to eat of him, all those things that he says, come to me or partake of me. And he said, I did it, and it always fixed the problem. That's what the song is about. That's what happened with Daniel. He says, and yet, I was turned to corruption. I was powerless, and yet I heard the voice of his words. I could remember the first time I heard the Lord speak to my heart. And with that word, I came alive. It was right then that I knew my sins were forgiven. That burden of sin was taken off of me. And that the divine God, somehow or other, had reached into me and changed me from death to life. And I've never faltered in that. There's never been any doubt about it because it was real. It is real. Yet I heard the voice of his words, and when I heard the voice of his words, then was I in a deep sleep on my face, and my face towards the ground. He just lying flat out on his face. Now some have commented that this meant once he heard the voice, he was at rest, and he just kind of like sleeping almost. I've been there too. Sometimes the Lord dealing with you will he's almost like he's rocking you to sleep. He takes away your cares and you can get your rest. That might have been what happened to Daniel. All we know is he was on his face just from hearing the Lord talk. And then we'll proceed with verse 10. And behold, a hand touched me. Of course, it was the Lord, which set me upon my knees and upon the palms of my hands. So the strength of the touch of the Lord got him up into like on all fours. That's about how far he could get at first. He's on all fours. And then he speaks again. He said unto me, O Daniel, a man greatly beloved. And these experiences that we have with God, if you've had them, don't you feel like you're loved? No matter how awful you feel about yourself, isn't it clear to you that the Lord is shedding forth his love in your heart? And it reminds you that he does love you. I mean, you feel his love within you. I do. I can't speak for you. But see what he's saying? Daniel, a man greatly beloved. Children's song. Jesus loves me, this I know. Well, I knew it because he's made it clear to me. Even though he's spirit and I am flesh, those two worlds can intersect. And they must if you're to be saved, because God's a spirit. And you have to come in contact with God in your spirit, even though it's currently residing in a mortal body, which is a sinful body. And yet he came into this world to save sinners. So it has to happen if you're to be saved. And it says, greatly beloved, he continues, the Lord does, understand the words that I speak unto you. So it's a commandment for God. You need to understand it. And we need to also. And stand upright, for unto thee am I now sent. Now, who sends Christ? The Father does, right? He says, I'm sent into this world. I have come into this world to do this and that. All through particularly the book of John, it talks about how he came into the world to save that which was lost. To say that which his Father told him to say. I don't speak of myself. I speak whatever the Father gives me, that's what I speak. He is under the will. He voluntarily submits himself. Even though he's equal with the Father, he submits himself to the will of the Father, if for no other reason than to demonstrate to us that if such a great one as he would do that, where are we to be found if we do not so submit ourselves to God? Who are we if Christ himself humbles himself and submits to the will of God in all things? Should we not also? And so he says, I want you to get upright. I'm sent now to you. He says, and when he had spoken, Daniel says, and when he had spoken this word to me, I stood. He said, so get up on your feet. So he stood on his feet. It's almost, he says something and he falls asleep. He touches him and he gets up on his all fours and he says something else and he's standing on his knees. He's bringing him up in stages. And then he said unto me, verse 12, fear not. Ain't that like Jesus? I mean, that's what he says. Be not afraid. Believe only. I mean, let not your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, also believe in me. In my Father's house. I mean, this is just how Jesus speaks all through the New Testament. We know this is the Lord because who else could command these things? An angel can't tell a man to do these. He can't do that. God has the right to command that which he has made. The angels can warn us. The angels can kill us. I mean, depending upon whether or not God lets them, but they have power. But they're not the one to instruct. It says, then he said to me, fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand. So 24 days ago, when he began to pray, he says, and to chasten thyself before, that means the fasting, before the Lord, thy words were heard, and I am come for thy words. So even though it's been a 23-day interval between the beginning of the prayer and Christ coming to him, the Lord heard right away. And he was not unmindful of Daniel. But he had other business to take care of. I know that sounds crazy, but he did. He knew that Daniel would wait. He knew that Daniel was going to be okay, and he'd come to him when he could. And it tells us why he was late. Verse 13. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. So for 21 days, he had some contest with an entity which he calls the prince of the kingdom of Persia. Now that entity could be a devil, a fallen angel of some sort. You know, we read in the book of Genesis, if you read the Septuagint, well, if you read the King James, it talks about the world being divided according, and given their places to reside, according to the number of the children of Israel that went down into Egypt. So 70. There were 70 people in the house of Jacob that all went down to Egypt. So 70. So the world was divided amongst 70 family groups. Same number as there were in the sons of Israel. But see, that's from a Masoretic text written in AD 1200. Okay, these people, they're not really our friends, these Jewish Masoretes that kept the old scriptures. They just thought, well, the son, see what it really says is the sons of God. And they took themselves to be the sons of God, so they just says the world was divided according to the number of the children of Israel, who are the sons of God, is what they're thinking. But if you read the Septuagint, the ancient translation into Greek, done in the 4th century BC, it says that the nations were divided according to the number of the sons of God. Now we know there's over 100 million angels in heaven. We know there's a bunch of them. A third are cast, of the total were cast out into the earth. I think it's possible that that is the suggestion that of all these nations being divided, over each of those, they may be small, they may be big, families that became nations in the world. The devil has his own person that's in charge of that, his own prince that's in charge of that, and God has his. We're going to read about God's because it says that Michael, the archangel, is the great prince of the Jewish people. See, God had appointed one. But the question is that what is keeping Jesus from coming to Daniel? The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me. Now we know that there's no fallen angel or good angel that could possibly stand up against Jesus. Jesus has all power. All power. He could just blink him out of existence. Make him never do, he could do anything. If you're omnipotent, and the Bible, it clearly says he is omnipotent, all powerful, he could do that. So I have to ask myself, who can resist God? Well, on the fallen angel part, it's by permission. They're eternal creatures. He created them that way. But like when they wanted to tempt Job, they had to get permission from God. And God said, okay, just don't hurt his flesh. Well, they killed all of his children, tore down the houses, stole all the flocks, had his wife turn against him. And he didn't turn on God. So now the devil comes back and he says, well, flesh for flesh, a man will do anything to protect his flesh. So God said, okay, you can hurt his flesh, just don't take his life. And so he covered him with boils. And of course, the devil was wrong. So each step had to be approved by God. So it's under the overall, whatever these things do, angels, devils, it's by the permission of God. And there's reasons for it that we don't know. So I don't see how any of them who have fought against the Lord for 21 days. And, it says, below Michael, one of the chief priests came to help me. Okay. So it's like, so Jesus needs some people say Michael is Christ, but I don't think so. I think the one this is Christ talking to Daniel. And he said, well, Michael came, and helped me. I think here in verse 13, the prince of the kingdom of Persia would have been Cyrus. He was the king over Persia in the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia. Okay. God rules in the affairs of men. He lifts kingdoms up. He puts kingdoms down. That's what Nebuchadnezzar learned in no uncertain terms after 7 years living like an animal. And he wrote a proclamation about it. We read about throughout the Bible, God rules in the affairs of this world. He lets things happen. He causes things to happen. He prevents things from happening, and all in order to accomplish his express will. And his will is for the good of his people and for the spoiling of those who are against him. So we don't know what was going on that Cyrus wanted to do or refused to want to do that the Lord needed done. But we know one thing, despite what some people teach, God does not force men to do anything. He does not. I mean, once they die, he may force them to go to hell if they're lost. They're not going to want to do that, but they have no choice. He has his angels or something takes them. In hell, they open up their eyes, being in torments. So, but while you live in this world, God has given freedom of conscience to men. They can make a choice. Calvinists say they can't. I think you can. That's the reason everything in this book is conditional. If you'll do this, and I'll do that. If you do this, I'll do that. I mean, it's all through there. And all these things you brought upon yourself. It's just as clear as the summer sun that we have choice. God's given it to us. And yet he persuades. Or he will try to. The Lord, complaining about men at the very end of his life, up on the Mount of Olives, after his last argument, if you will, with the Pharisees in Jerusalem. And on the very night, I believe, when he leaves Jerusalem that night, and he's crucified 2 days later, he gets outside the city, looks back on it and says, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that slayest the prophets and stonest thou that are sent unto you, how often would I have gathered you together? How often I would have gathered you together as a hen gathereth her chicks under her wings, but you would not." In other words, he'd been working on the hearts of men the whole time he was down here. The words that he spake to Daniel that caused so much trouble, and never man spake like Christ speaks. All these people hearing it throughout the land of Israel, it was for their good. But in many of them it didn't work. He didn't force it. He was, as a spirit, working on the heart and mind of Cyrus to do a certain thing, or to refrain. We don't know what it was. And probably the devil prince was working the opposite direction on Cyrus. So now you can almost see 21 days, because it goes at the pace that men go, right? You're trying to get Cyrus to do the right thing. And then you got this other one trying to get Cyrus to do the wrong thing. Now, we've all seen cartoons, at least the older ones have, cartoons on TV, and you got like a devil on one ear and you got a little angel on the other ear, and they're telling you, do this, oh no, don't do that. And remember those cartoons where you got the good guys and the bad guys whispering in your ears, telling you? That may not be too far from the truth. Because God, the devils can't force you unless God lets them, which he doesn't. And God won't force you, but they will act upon your heart to bring about a desired end. Sometimes they're always at odds with each other. And it depends upon the person which way it goes, right? If Cyrus had not complied, Cyrus would have been taken out by God ultimately, if what was needed was that important. But for anyway, that it took 21 days for the Lord And Michael comes in to help him. Maybe Michael was fighting off the devil prince from, doing whatever. But the Lord must have, in 21 days, convinced Cyrus to, put an impression upon his mind to do what God wanted done. Now, does that make sense? That's the only way I can see it. Because this is obviously the Lord that is speaking to Daniel, that has given him strength, made him stand up, tell him he's beloved. And he said, I would have come right away, Daniel. I heard you. I heard your prayer from day one. But Cyrus was kicking up a fuss, and it took 21 days to get him straightened out. That's Harvey's words for it, but I think that's about the size of it. We persuade men. And if the Lord himself, doesn't always reach men. I would have gathered you together, but you would not. How much less can we expect to always be successful when we go out and try to persuade men to turn to the Lord? It's just a reality we have to live with. We're not going to make it with most people. Anyway, it says, verse 14, Christ continuing, the pre-incarnate Lord, now I am come to make Daniel, understand what shall befall thy people in the latter days, for yet the vision is for many days. So it's going to be some way off, Daniel, but I'm going to tell you what's going to happen to your people in that way off time. It's a really bad thing that's going to happen. And it really has to do with one of the kings of Greece in particular that causes the most trouble. But that's just jumping ahead. So he says, verse 15, and when he had spoken such words to me, so this is when the Lord had spoke to Daniel those words, he said, I set my face towards the ground and became dumb. In other words, I was speechless. I guess he's thinking, wow. See, we're reading about it. But the Lord probably explained it better. He speaks to the heart and the mind when he speaks. He probably made it clear to Daniel the goings on that take place between spirits, the world of spirits, good and bad, and the world of men. See what I'm saying? And how they do have such an impact on mortal lives. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, is what the apostle says, but against principalities and powers and, all that kind of stuff. I can't ever remember how to quote that. But we have other enemies. They're the ones that we need to be worried about. So he said, I was just struck dumb. He must have been thinking, how could God be held up 21 days? Same questions we would have. He was speechless. And then verse 16, and behold, one like the similitude of the sons of men, not the Son of Man. That's a different entity. That's Christ. It always means Christ. Or Daniel himself. God calls Daniel the Son of Man. And I think it's because he loves us so much, he shares that title. Not in any real way, but just when he talks about him. He says, another one that looks like a man. That's what he's saying. Here's an angel, I think, that looks like a man. Touch my lips. Now remember how Isaiah, an angel went up to the altar and took a burning coal and touched his lips with a burning coal, and he was able to speak. Well, Daniel had just become speechless, and so an angel that looks like a man came to him. Now some people say this is Gabriel. Some will say it is Michael. We don't know. It doesn't say, but I'm pretty sure it's an angel that looks like a man, and they usually do when men are made to be able to see them. And I opened my mouth and spake. And I said unto him that stood before me. Now this clinches it. If you have any doubt about this encounter being with Christ, here's what Daniel says. Now that he's able to speak, he says, "O my Lord." You're not going to say that to the angel. "O my Lord, by the vision my sorrows are turned upon me." See, he saw more than he is written here and it's making him extremely sorrowful, depressed. And I have retained no strength. For how can the servant of this, my Lord, it means, how can I, who am your servant, talk with this, my Lord? How can I, who's nothing but a slave, how can I talk to God? That's what that means. That's easy to talk to God, you know, when you just start talking to God. But when God's on the scene, the words you choose become pretty, it turns out they're usually pretty few and far between. Just think about the publican who could not even lift up his eyes, you know, toward heaven, but smote himself on the breast. And he just says, have mercy. You know, mercy. When the Lord has most enabled my prayers, I'm usually reduced to just a word or two here and there as he's blessing my heart. I might say mercy or help, you know, or forgive, or, you know, whatever. Just, you know, you don't need a superfluity of words. You just need your heart to pour out your need to God. Sometimes saying the words help, sometimes it doesn't. But God looks on the heart, and that's what prayer should be. He says, how can the servant of this, my Lord, speak with this, my Lord? For as for me, straightway there remains no strength in me, neither is there breath left in me. Lord, you've taken my breath away, and I can't talk. So he deals with it again. Then there came again and touched me one like unto the appearance of a man, so either that same angel or another one, and he strengthened me and said, O man, greatly beloved, fear not. Peace be unto you. So this does sound more like an angel. Peace be unto you. You know, the angels told the shepherds when they announced Christ, you know, it says, you know, fear not. You know, for you know, there's born this day in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. And, you know, he calmed the shepherds. He says, peace be unto you, be strong, yea, be strong. And when he had spoken to me, so what are angels? We read in the Bible, the good angels, they're called ministering spirits that minister unto the sons of God, meaning the children of God. And that's what this angel's doing. Be strong, yea, be strong. He doesn't just say it. There must be some power that goes, a strengthening power that ministers. You know, they did that to Christ. After he was tempted 40 days, he'd fasted 40 days in the wilderness. He was tempted of the devil throughout that time. And at the end of that time, angels came and ministered. When he was in the Garden of Gethsemane and he was sweating blood, and he had prayed 3 times in a great agony for God to let the cup pass, and it was not to happen, it says, angel came and ministered unto him. Well, now we got one ministering to Daniel because his breath has been taken from him and he has 0 strength. So he says, be strong, yea, be strong. And when he had spoken unto me, I was strengthened. Just the speaking of it brought it about. And so Daniel says, let my Lord speak, for thou hast strengthened me. So he's ready to listen. He's got his faculties back. See how an encounter like that with the Lord is not a light thing? When I hear preachers talking about it like, oh, I was just having breakfast and me and Jesus were talking about this and that, I don't believe it for a minute. If you really get in touch with the Lord, you don't talk flippantly about it. Usually you don't talk about it at all because it's personal, you know. But in either case, he's now talking to the Lord. He says, then said he, meaning the Lord. So he said, let my Lord speak, for thou hast strengthened me. So now it's Jesus talking again. Then said he, then said the Lord, knowest thou wherefore I came unto thee? Do you understand the reason I came? And now I will return to fight with the prince of Persia. Again, he's still got more dealings with Cyrus to get him on the straight and narrow, I guess. He says, and when I'm gone forth, in other words, when he's through with there, he says, and I don't know if that means immediately or it's going to be many years later, lo, the Prince of Greece shall come. So when he's done with Persia, Greece is coming. And he's going to have to deal with Greece too. Because it's the countries that are impacting the Jews whose history and future Daniel is concerned about. So you say, well, if I'm going to help you, I've got to deal with these entities that are out here to hurt you, and with your own princes that are influenced by these devils. I've got to deal with that, both amongst the Persians and subsequent to that the Greeks. He says, but I will show thee that which is noted in the scripture of truth. And there's none that holdeth with me in these things, but Michael, your prince. So I think Michael is the angel, the prince that God has appointed for the Jewish people. And he's named because it's the Jewish people that wrote this. It makes sense that he would be. That doesn't mean that America doesn't have one. Maybe they do. I don't understand that. We need some right now. But that's the end of the chapter. And all it is like a introduction to this vision that continues. When we get to chapter 11, it's still Jesus talking. It goes straight from saying, but Michael, your prince. Also, I, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to confirm and to strengthen him. So Jesus continues to speak across this chapter division. So pay no attention to the chapter division, but we're going to stop at this point and open it up for anything that anyone has to say at this point.